everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be very different to the usual content you're used to seeing here on this channel. It's going to be a video that I have wanted to do for a very long time. I am not here telling you my story because I want sympathy. That's the last thing that I want. But what I do want is to raise awareness for these conditions and to raise awareness to actually get us some medical help. There's a beautiful world out there, and so many people, including myself, who are suffering with these diseases are unable to experience it. This hasn't just affected my relationships with people, my job, my career, my romantic life. It's literally affected every aspect of my being. It's almost like I feel like I'm existing and I'm not living. And I know I'm not alone with feeling that way, and I know that many people who are living with and dealing with this, even, you know, there's a lot of people that have this even far worse off than me, and really that's why I'm doing this video. So as you may or may not know, I have an illness called myalgic encephalomyelitis, ME for short. And I've spoken about this many times actually on my social medias, but recently I have been diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. I got this official diagnosis around the beginning of June, I think it was. All of this really affects my absolute day-to-day life. It would explain why you only see me upload about once a month. The times that I actually upload are what I would call my good days. I literally, most of the time, I just take the makeup off afterwards and get straight back into bed. It's debatable among a lot of people whether ME is just an umbrella name for all sorts of different kinds of autoimmune diseases and bacterial diseases like Lyme disease. I don't want to get into that in this video. I just personally, I feel like I have ME and Lyme disease because some symptoms are very different. But anyway, so I'm going to tell you about how this happened to me and how my life has now come down to me being mostly housebound, often bedbound, and at the moment I can leave my house maybe twice a week, but it fluctuates massively, and that's another problem with this condition, is that it fluctuates so much that it's very, very difficult for people to understand the realities of it. And as human beings, we make judgments very, very quickly on people, and we think that what we see or what we see on social media is the reality of like somebody's life. And for me personally, I have to say that, you know, for years I hid this so well from most people around me, from the world out there, because especially when I was in the music industry and trying to get into the music industry more seriously, the last thing you would want potential record companies and other people that you're working with to know is that you are sick, because by being sick you are unreliable. So I'm going to begin my story here. So my story starts when I was born. Within a couple of months, my parents were told I was diagnosed with chronic adult asthma. It was at a hospital in London where they told my parents that I definitely had chronic adult asthma and that I was going to need to be put on steroids to actually be able to even survive. So within that meantime, I as a baby, like I kept getting really sick. I would catch every virus going, and I was constantly on antibiotics. And the reason being I had to be because I couldn't breathe. I was in and out of hospital a lot, and I would say, you know, by the age of 10, I can't even count how many antibiotic courses I must have been on. It could have been hundreds, to be honest, by then, because it seemed like every month I was sick again and needed antibiotics. I needed really high strength ones. When I had just turned 3, we moved to Cyprus, which, for those who don't know, is an island in the Mediterranean, because my dad is Greek Cypriot. If you don't know much about Lyme disease, the most common way to get Lyme disease is from a tick that carries a bacteria called Borrelia. Living in Cyprus, they say the Mediterranean and Greece and those areas are actually like a target place for Borrelia and Lyme disease to exist in ticks. I remember when I was around 13 or 14 years old, I was in the mountains. I was always in the mountains in Cyprus because we had family friends who were there. My dad loved being in the mountains, so I was always there with them. And this dog, this mountain dog, was absolutely covered in ticks, like, you know, when they get really big and just full of blood, I'm assuming. But we didn't know anything about ticks, we didn't know anything about Lyme disease, and me and my friend felt really sorry for this dog, and so we started with scissors. Literally, don't ask, we were 13 years old, but we were trying to get these ticks off this dog, and so I was handling these ticks, and I'm pretty sure one of them probably bit me. So recent studies show that Lyme disease is not only carried by ticks, it can be carried by infected mosquitoes, spiders, and various different insects. And living in such a hot climate as Cyprus is actually one of the places on the map that recent studies have shown that these insects do carry Borrelia and a lot of the co-infections. But living in such a country, the thing is like, especially like someone as pale as me, I was being bitten by insects left, right and centre since, you know, the moment I was a kid. You're not going to go running to the doctor every time you have a rash or, you know, a bite from an insect, because you'd literally be there every day. And being so pale, I know that, like, you know, shows up even more. I was always allergic to everything anyway, so I was always having, you know, golf ball insect bites. And not only that, but the they say the Lyme ring, the like bullseye rash that you get with Lyme, when I've seen pictures of it, now that I know about Lyme, I had seen that on me multiple times. But this is the thing, and this is another reason that I think we need to make people aware of Lyme disease and how it's caught and how it can completely destroy your life, because we had no idea. If we had known that when you see a bullseye rash and you're in a situation where you've potentially been bitten by a tick or these kind of insects, that you should go to the doctor and get treatment straight away. Because here's the thing, if you catch Lyme disease within the first couple of weeks to a month, even 2, but really the first 3 weeks is the most crucial stage. You'll be treated with antibiotics. You'll probably have to take them for 2 to 3 weeks, and more than likely the Borrelia will be killed, the co-infections will be killed, and you'll be fine. However, if it's not caught and it goes on for years and years and years, like it has in me, it becomes extremely difficult to eradicate, and that's when it becomes chronic Lyme. Now, along with this story, which is why I think I have a positive test for Borrelia and Lyme disease, I had been told for years that I had myalgic encephalomyelitis. So, after I moved to the UK, I caught glandular fever, and I caught it at a time where it was during my A-levels. I had only been living in the country again for a couple of months, I was highly stressed. I was doing my A-levels. I was really missing home. I was, really missing my family. Like, my mum had moved with me, but my dad was still there, and like all my extended family. I was really missing my friends. They say that when you combine all these stresses, and then on top of it I had caught glandular fever. It was absolutely awful, and during my glandular fever I had to sit my A-level exams. A lot of people catch glandular fever, or what they call Epstein-Barr virus. Sometimes it's called mono, but it doesn't seem to stay activated in the body, and a lot of people develop ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis. It seems to be one of the very common threads in people who then develop ME. You'll find that a lot of them had mono Epstein-Barr glandular fever at some point beforehand, and it's often not just the virus. It's almost like the perfect storm. Age, I was 16, and I felt like that was when my life started to really change. I went from being this really ambitious, energetic, like, person who was obsessed with dance and obsessed with ballet and obsessed with singing and my music and after school hobbies and socially interacting with people and having fun, to I just couldn't understand what was wrong with me, because I felt like I was just so severely fatigued. It was like I had caught glandular fever, and I just felt like I never ever recovered, ever. It felt like every day that I woke up, I had flu symptoms, and I just couldn't shake them. And but I was just so the extreme fatigue was just getting worse and worse. I had started to get problems with my muscles. I was starting to have memory problems. I started to feel like I had Alzheimer's, and I was 16 years old. So initially, in these initial years of the ME developing, I had no idea I had ME. I'd never heard of it, didn't know what it was. I was trying to still live my life. So then at 19, I went off to university. I was so happy because I'd auditioned and got into the university that I had wanted and planned to go to since I had lived in Cyprus. I went to the Academy of Contemporary Music in Guildford. I was all excited. I thought, this is going to be like an amazing time. But soon after term started, I was really struggling to keep up with life, and that was when the extreme fatigue just got even worse. So it was starting to get to a point now where I felt like I was just weak, and I felt like everybody else around me and the other students that I lived with, I thought they must have all this as well, and they're somehow getting through. So because one of my symptoms with ME and Lyme is a pretty hideous brain fog, I find it absolutely impossible now to remember any kind of information. It just won't retain. I remember struggling through school and university trying to read and actually retain the information, and I would be reading the same page for about 2 hours. It got to the point where it was literally just impossible. I lived about a half an hour's walk away from my university. I was noticing that every time I tried to attempt this, I would feel so ill afterwards. I would get these extreme flu symptoms that I still get to this day, except now it happens to me after just 5 minutes of any kind of exercise. It could be, just now every time I walk to the bus stop and back, this will happen to me. But at the time I was absolutely dumbfounded, because I would, after any kind of exercise, back then the threshold was a lot higher, yes, but I would start getting flu symptoms. My whole body would shake. It would be, 30 degrees outside, and I would be absolutely, couldn't stop shaking. I'd be like feeling frozen from the inside. I've had to wrap up in loads of layers. It was just getting worse and worse and worse. To pull out of my uni just before the end of the first year, and I had to move back in. I had to move town again and move back in with my mum. So I had moved back home with my mum, and I'd seen some improvement in my ME, not really. It was very up and down. I had managed to get a job as a PA, and I was just trying to live my life like any young person was. And then I was still trying to pursue my music career. I had then made it into a girl band, which was the first girl band that I was in. One night we had done a gig, and we had come back after travelling back for like about an hour to the apartment that we were staying in, and then we got back about 5 a.m. and then I remember the other girls got up at like around 10 o'clock and they went to the pool, and they were messaging me, you know, like, hello, like, where are you? And I literally remember getting up, and it was roasting hot. It was about 45 degrees. We were in the capital, Nicosia of Cyprus. And I remember lying on the marble floor and just crying my eyes out because I was in so much pain. It was like my body just felt like there was acid just running through all my muscles. And I was dealing with really low blood pressure at that point as well. And I just felt so sick and I couldn't understand. Again, I was thinking, you're weak. And I kept just telling myself, and I'm crying on the floor, just saying like, you're so weak, and you know, how come all these other girls are fine, they can do all this, and they must be feeling the same way. And I just remember just being in agony and feeling like I was just really struggling to even move my limbs, let alone have to do another performance that night. It was after I returned back to England after that I knew there was something very wrong with me, and it was actually my mum that had heard of ME. She had been researching all my symptoms, and that it was then that we went to my GP, and we'd been there so often and so many times, and they literally kept telling my mum that was a problem with my mum and that she just couldn't let go. And it's like, yeah, of course, that's why you have scars in your bladder and extreme fatigue and you can't move and you have so much pain, clearly because your mum doesn't want to let go. But anyway, and we asked, you know, could this be ME, like, you know, is there a specialist? And GP literally sat there and was like, you know, what do you want me to do? So we had to go research, find somebody, found a specialist in Surrey, asked to be referred. And I remember the GP saying, you know, even if it is ME, I'll never forget her words. She looked me dead in the eye and she went, nothing you can do about it. And that was so devastating. And I think it's so devastating to tell somebody that. You've got a young person sitting in front of you who is desperately clutching at their life in front of you and is saying, please help me. I'm having all these problems, and by this time it had been going on for 5 years. And you just turn around and say, yeah, nothing you can do about it. Bye. I was absolutely gobsmacked. But anyway, so then I went to see the specialist. He's an immunologist, really great doctor, and he had an interest, as they say, in ME. And that was when I got my official diagnosis of ME. And then just frantically started researching. I was like, right, I know what this is now. Now I can recover. It's going to happen. I think it was like blind optimism, really. But it just felt like everything I found and everything I tried, I came to a dead end. And, you know, I was just trying like everything I possibly could. And it felt as well like the more successful things were going for me in music. By this time I had left the band. I literally just couldn't cope with the schedule anymore. I was just feeling so ill. On top of that, there were problems in the band, as there always is when you get 6 girls together. people who are very healthy in the music industry will tell you how hard it is and how you have to be on it like constantly. You have to be working 24/7, and it's not an easy thing to do. And the problem was that as the years went on, I just started to decline. Like, I wasn't getting better, I was getting worse. So I had to completely give up what I've trained all my life to do. I've been training since I was 6 years old. It's been really difficult to just see that disappear, and I'm sure other people with these diseases will really relate to this, but it is so horrible seeing everybody that you know move forward in their life, whether it's their career, whether it's relationships. They're just living life, and they're growing up, and they're experiencing the world, and you're just watching from the inside of four walls constantly. I've battled on for years, just desperately trying to hold on to the fact that this was going to go somehow and I could push through it. But in the past 9 months, it's got to the point where it's just impossible anymore. It's impossible to be professional when you become so unreliable, because I don't know from one day to the next if I'm going to wake up and be able to move my legs. And it's really, really disheartening when you feel like there's just no hope and there's no end to this complete pain and misery that you're in every day. And it's the type of illness where you can't just push through it. You can't be present there because it's physically impossible. So when I had to completely give up my music career and my body just completely forced me to stop everything in my life, I turned to makeup, and I just used it as a way of keeping who I am, because one of the things with this illness and with everything else that I've experienced because of it is it slowly strips away who you are, and it slowly strips away your identity. And if you can hold on to any part of you that is still you, I think do it as much as you can, because this illness will take away so much from you, and the struggle is not to lose who you are in it. You are not your illness. Your illness is stopping you from living life the way you planned and the way you wanted. And so for me, starting this makeup channel was a way for me to deal with that and to still do something creative. And although I don't really get to film that often, because I'm usually not well enough to do so, it has been a great source of happiness for me. And being able to be artistic with makeup, it's always been like another passion of mine. And I wanted to just have fun and create a channel where I could express myself. So I'm going to talk about this openly. If you are sensitive to this subject, which I feel like you shouldn't be because we're all human, then feel free to switch off now. I started to develop cystitis symptoms, and they were extremely severe. But this cystitis problem set in with a vengeance. We were at the point with my doctors where we had gone from the smaller antibiotics like trimethoprim, we moved up the scale all the way up to ciprofloxacin, which I was having to take like a couple of times a month. Cystitis is the worst pain you could ever feel when you get it to the degree that I used to get it to, because some people literally can just get it very normally. They take little sachets and they're fine. I was way past that point. I was starting to pee blood, and they would get so severe I'd literally just be screaming in agony. And I can't tell you how many times I spent the night literally just, I had to spend the night sleeping on the toilet. I remember with my head like draped on the bath, sometimes for 2 days. In the meantime, we had, you know, seen lots of specialists for this cystitis problem. I'd had a cystoscopy and they had said that I had a lot of scarring in my bladder. Having had to deal with the chronic cystitis for all these years, it has dramatically affected every relationship I've ever been in. Having tried every single medicine that the doctors have given me, having tried every single therapy, having tried every single holistic therapy for this, and it's still not having gone away, and it literally has just been getting worse every single year. And I feel like my day-to-day life with not just ME and Lyme, but these other symptoms that the Lyme bacteria has caused, I feel like it's the Borrelia that is causing this, all the cystitis problems. It's the Borrelia that is causing my immune system to not be able to fight anything. It's causing it not to be able to fight any bacteria. And the longer this goes on for, the longer my life is being robbed. And I can come to terms with losing my career. I can come to terms with having ME and Lyme and being in pain all the time. But it's really, really hard to accept the fact that I'm probably never going to be able to have a relationship again, and I'll probably never have children. Because it's asking a lot of somebody to take on. And I know that not everybody who suffers with chronic cystitis do not all have Lyme disease, and they do not all have ME. But I know that I never had any of these problems before I caught glandular fever and before Borrelia took hold of my body. I know that is a fact. I'm making this video so that other people out there with ME and Lyme can know that they're not alone, and other women out there with chronic cystitis, but also because I am really appealing to everybody to please just share this video. Please just raise awareness. Please just let your friends know that this exists. All I'm asking for is that myalgic encephalomyelitis and chronic Lyme disease is taken seriously, and that actual biomedical research is done. Thank you so much for listening, and I want you guys to know that this channel is not going to be a negative channel at all. This is a place for people to connect and to feel uplifted, and I want you guys to come here to feel better. But I had to make this video. It's been very, very difficult for me to talk about these things, but I feel like it's been necessary. And I'd like to thank you so much for sticking with me and for listening. Thank you.